I think we are live and alive both. Just a second. Think chat's working well and fine.
Chat's working well and fine.
Yep. Daily reminder: we are so back again. Just let me have a check. One of my other accounts. It's working fine, well and good, and we can get started. It's working fine, right? Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, it's working fine.
Hello. Yeah, it's working fine.
Cool. So, it's glad to be back twice in a row. I would say once again we are back. I did two streams yesterday on the Iran topic. And I thought why not just talk a bit more on the last video which we were talking about the geopolitical tensions and the overall geopolitical questions happening about. I was supposed to make video a couple of hours back, but I was watching F1. The Mercedes right now is a rocket ship. Even a rocket ship is a very small word for the way Toto has been smoking in the last two races whenever the 1-2 comes about. So I feel, yeah, this particular year is going to be a total domination by Mercedes. I thought maybe it could be a year for Max Verstappen to get his fifth championship, or maybe Charles Leclerc to finally get a championship at his hand. But I don't think that's how it's going to happen for now, because that Mercedes is a rocket engine.
Because that
So that's enough with the rant. I thought even P3, P4 could have sufficed, but the sprint was a total disaster for Verstappen today. It came at P8 and Hadjar at P10. So yeah, 1.7 seconds of gap between Red Bull and Mercedes at the top. Yeah, we are cooked. Anyways, we will have that rant sometime or the other. So hello everyone, welcome back to the channel once again. I had started a discussion around some 50 geopolitical questions, something which we should be aware around, and it helps kind of in the discussion which then takes place. So in the spirit of that, I am once again here. I wish to talk about those questions which I was left with. Before I start, small disclaimer once again: I'm not a geopolitical expert. I'm just someone who likes to talk about geopolitics and world history in general. So yeah, I'm here. So without any further delays, let me just open up the map of the world history, and then yeah, we can start to talk. Yesterday we finally did the geopolitics video on the Iran issue. I hope it helped serve the justice and see the way the things have been evolving about. So without any further, I would say delays, let's get started with today's discussion at hand. It's the next set of 10 questions which I had in front of me on the geopolitical status. So yeah, let's just talk about that. Okay. So I think the maps were loaded, Steam's working fine, chat's working fine. So yeah, let's get started now. Okay, so moving towards the next question which we had. Just a second. Yep. Are we moving towards a more divided world order? I think yes, the scenario has evolved around the same case where the world is becoming more and more divided in itself. If I have to give a bit of a context, the context which can be touched upon here, that's the element around the US, NATO, I would say, and in general, the way the relationship between EU has been coming about. Even as the case of China comes, African countries also in the mix, and Latin America, one side towards the US and other towards much of a neutral, or mainly towards the case of the emerging market end. So that's the case which I feel when we say the world being more and more divided. If I trace back to the last couple of 2 3 months, the way situations were evolving, when the attack on Venezuela took place by Mr. Trump and the US administration, uh, we thought that maybe giving Venezuela to USA at the time might appease the administration and things could be sorted down. But like it said, that if appeasement goes on becoming more and more and more, it leads to ultimately a chaos and the issue itself. And the biggest crisis, I would say, in the modern era between the USA and the NATO and the European Union allies is the case of the Greenland issue. Mr. Trump had been fixated in his previous administration when he was back in 2018-19 also, talking about how they can once again get the Greenland as its own base. That was an issue which had been building up since 2018, but it got more accelerated right now with Mr. Trump's demand increasing. That's where I feel that initially I would say the world order started to divide. US, UK led army started to send some personals here. Denmark was mentioning that they would defend at whatever might they can the country of Greenland, sorry, the region of Greenland. So that's where I felt that the fissures in the overall Western powers started to build up. The Davos summit took place. The Davos summit, we saw how countries went to and fro against each other. Mr. Macron with his shiny glasses commenting towards US administration, Mr. Trump commenting on the way things are happening about. That's where I feel that the division and the fissure have started to come about. Not just the case of the US, NATO, and the European Union, even in the case of UN. So last year, 2025 was 25, it is 80 years to the UN formation. And we saw how things happened in that summit. Mr. Trump went guns on blazing against UN. He went on saying how he has stopped 7 8 wars and how UN has not been able to perform the job opportunities which they wanted to carry on ahead. Even the creation of the peace board plan, the peace board for Gaza, it was meant to be for Gaza, but it went on being something beyond Gaza and West Asia. That's where I feel the way things were happening, the international law and order was being respected. Some way or the other, it has started to change. Mr. Frederick Merz, the Chancellor of Germany, he very well quoted recently after the bombing by USA and Israel that Frederick Merz, he quoted that the international rules-based order is declining more and more, and no point to lecture allies. So that's what I feel when the discussion around the case of the world order has been building about. The sensitivities and the overall, I would say, responsiveness which the countries used to have in the past, it has been changed. They are becoming more and more aggressive for their own interests because, like I mentioned in the past, this is a realist world where countries act idealist. That's the big thing for this particular era. So that's the case for the UN, the Peace Book Plan, the US, NATO, European Union. The case of China and uh, trying to curb the elements around trade so that the national security of the USA can be protected. China has been growing in itself. China is cooperating, have investments with China. Apart from one country, we have the Aspartini. So apart from that, majority countries in the Africa right now, somewhere or the other, in an investment linkage with China. And the way the world order used to look like, it's digressing, it's degrading, and new powers, mainly China as a force, has been rising about. And like I mentioned in the past also, China's rise to glory would not be beneficial for anyone. So that's the case for the declining world order. Even when we talk about the case of the African countries, there was a time when the European Union's countries used to show the dominance in the African states, especially in the West Saharan countries. The countries like Sierra Leone, Guinea-Bissau, Mali, Niger, Chad, these had prominent positioning of the European countries. However, the way African nations now wanted to see their own dominance and also their own sovereignty, that's where I felt that the dominance and the presence of the European countries, it had started to decline. That's where the power holding share by France and UK has been declining. That's the initial case of the world order declining. Even in the case of Latin America, if we see, Latin America is something I feel is gonna be in the news along. As of now, things are chaos here. Uh, Coming to the case of the world order, how things have been evolving here. So Argentina, Bolivia, Chile hold the majority of the position when it comes to the case of the lithium triangle, and that offers incentives to other countries to come and invest here and extract benefits. Argentina has now a particular president whose friendship is a lot with the US counterparts, and that friendship benefits mainly USA and, of course, Argentina relations. The crisis which has happened in the case of Venezuela, there is being influenced by USA a lot. The oil has been taken care of by the US carcass has fallen, and overall now what we see in the case of Latin America is things developing towards a wrong turn, because whenever a major drug lord or a major, I would say, kingpin is removed from Latin America. What happened in the case of Mexico, even, or the Venezuela also, other small ancillary powers started to come up. But I feel, when I always mention the case of that, if a central power gets removed, what happens is the small powers get an incentive to act finally. The thing is, when there is a central power, yes, I'm not at any way trying to say that what they were doing was right, but the point is, when that central power was at the play, the lower powers, the weaker ones, they were not able to act against the will of the central power. And if an abrupt removal of the central power has happened about, the weak ones get an incentive to carry on the operations and win through the scrapes which have been left. That's where it happened in the case of Colombia also. When finally Pablo Escobar was killed, the issues in the Bogota area around the case of drug lord did not ended. What happened was even something more. Much more powers, much more weaker powers came together, and Colombia faced several issues regarding the case of drug. And when finally the drug lords and the organization in the Colombia died down, they shifted towards Ecuador. Ecuador is a country which has had very few incidents of homicide happening about, but there has been reports of football players, junior players, young players being killed. That's where I feel that the issue keeps on transferring as the central power declines. And the case of the world order, Venezuela currently goes toward the case of US. If an attack happens on Colombia right now, because Colombian president and Mr. Trump both don't see eye and eye. So Colombia falls, Ecuador falls. And technically speaking, then if I see the case of India, India gets left with only one ally, Brazil here. And that's a big issue, because Mexico is also not much of a good friend of ours. They were even talking about applying sanctions on us also. In the meanwhile, the taxes and all. That's what I feel the case of the world order being more and more fragmented. What I feel right now, the bipolar world in the Cold War era went towards a unipolar world, and what we are now seeing is a multipolarity of a world, where USA is a faction, where European Union is a faction, Russia in itself is a dominant force yet, China is a dominant force up and growing. India tries to project itself as the leader amongst the global south, but it's still a while before we can, I would say, match to the capabilities and the, I would say, potential of going much beyond the South Asia domain, because we have our own issues. We are yet, I would say, boxed in South Asia because of the constraints around Pakistan and China. Despite of the fact that yes, we have been expanding across the borders, we have the prominence in the Indian Ocean, Andaman Nicobar Islands being a strategic point for countering China's adventures in the Malacca Strait. But still, it's a long way before we can call India the advanced country. The 2047 goal is still well and alive. But that's where I feel the world order keeps on getting fragmented and fragmented and fragmented. What we can see, or what we can envisage, is a bridge which should be brought about, a solution potential which I often feel can be tried, is a bridge between India and Europe. Because if India and Europe start to work together with each other, somewhere or the other, I feel that the case of stability and peace can be ensured. Because the thing is, uh, USA is someone who always look for their own benefit. They look for the case of own dominance. China's rise to power, the century of humiliation, the boiling frog strategy, which they use to slowly and slowly mount up the pressure and then expand their own interest. These two countries, I don't think, are gonna be much lookout for the global south. But somewhere or the other, Europe now sees its own power declining from the era of the World War, and that's where I feel that if any uh, peaceful way of transitioning towards a new global order could be thought of, Europe and India could play a good role. Countries like Germany, France, India, if combined, they can project a much better world for the global world order. That's what I feel for this particular question around the global world order. So that's the case for, are we moving towards a more divided world order? Yes, of course, we are moving towards a much and much divided world order, but there is still hope. They say cynics get to be right, but optimists gets to be rich. And the thing is, we have to be optimistic, because if everyone starts to, I would say, defect and think that we are just here on a plate to be eaten up or eat, it would lead to surmountable issues across the board. So that's my take for this particular issue. Coming over, why is technological becoming a tool of geopolitical competition? I think this question holds such a big relevance right now with the issues around the cloud deal in Pentagon, and then also around the case of how cloud software was used during the Venezuelan crisis, and then reports of Israel using the social network analysis to pinpoint the accurate location of where the Ayatollah Khamenei and the bodyguards were moving. So that's where I feel tech as a main major point has started to evolve. So to give a bit of a context once again, so Claude uh, Anthropic's AI agent. It's just, I would say, a surreal moment that finally I am able to talk about something around tech also. I'm not much of a tech guy. I have always told my friend that I'm not a tech guy. But I think the way geopolitics has been evolving right now, technology is something which I would need to read more and more about. I'm not that much of a, I would say, expert in the technological arena. So if there's someone who is watching this content and can provide me some good content or good resources to read on, I would surely like to read more. But I'm glad that this particular topic is more and more in the news and people are getting aware about, because technology has been shaping the way we see the world. It has gone much and more beyond the case of normal bow and arrow towards the bombs, and now the case of drones being used. So yeah, coming back to the case. So Claude's is basically Anthropic's AI agent. Like we have OpenAI's chatbot ChatGPT, or we have Anthropic's AI agent, the Claude. And what Claude has projected itself to be is a much of a responsible and ethics oriented AI tool. That's how cloud has presented its image to the rest of the world. But what happened in the past 3 to 4 months shows the issue developing about on how countries are trying to extract the use of AI in the era of warfare. So it came as a report that the issue which happened in the Venezuela, cloud software was taken help of by the US Pentagon, the war, so the Defense Ministry administration to carry out these projects. That's where one of the clouds representative, he went in the Pentagon and asked how their tool was being used, and on they then saying that this is not the right way to use the software. Things went on an escalatory route when Mr. Trump said that he would invoke the special act around the case of emergency, wherein Claude would be declared as a supply chain risk to the USA's, I would say, security and overall sovereignty, and their tools would be confiscated, and any other deal which they had would get closed off. And that's what happened. The deal got closed off, and OpenAI jumped to take this space. OpenAI then saw a huge backlash on the same. They had to post an Instagram apology. Many people at the time started to unlock out of their accounts on OpenAI using more and more of Claude. So that's how the technology has been being used, and Claude being a prominent topic here, because the thing which happened was they were wanting to use this in mass surveillance and in autonomous killing. And the CEO of Cloud and Anthropic, and Mr. Dario, he was like, "No, boss, you can't do this. That's not what Anthropic's policies, the Cloud's agenda is. We are building up a much more responsible AI, which needs to have the interplay of human decision making finally, and not something which can be used as a weapons of mass destruction." That's the case for the cloud and the technological impact. And then we see the stance around drones. Drones have entirely changed the warfare across the board. Uh, its peak we saw in the case of Ukraine and the Russia issue. Tankers of Russia. like was surprised when I saw that this thing was happening. Simple DIY made retrofitted drones from Ukrainian side were going and bombing like hell when it came to the case of Russia. They were able to decimate tanks of Russia. It was, I would say, a marvelous spectacular when it comes to the case of technology. The classic example of David versus Goliath. Small drones just going and plummeting the tanks like anything. I think I have a video for this if I can attached in the document here. Just a second. Just sorry, apologies. I had a particular message, so just wanted to have a quick look on that. I think the chat's working fine. Hello. Just sorry, apologies. I had a particular message, so just wanted to have a quick look. So yeah, once again coming back to the case. Yeah, Russia and the issue of Ukraine. So I had a particular video with me which I can attach here. Is the chat working fine? Yeah. So there was a video by Johnny Harris on Ukraine drones. He showed basically how the drones are being used as such a, I would say, a marvelous adventure of the tech industry. So I'm just attaching it in the document itself, so that it can be referred across by other people too. Just a second. One thing I would need to learn more is the case of using this software well. I am not able to edit. Yeah. So yeah, I've attached this particular video here. It's a very great video on the case of how the drones, the DIY drones, were being used by Russia, Ukraine. That's the case for here. Coming up next ahead. Just a second. Just a second. Yeah. So the Russia Ukraine issue, like we saw at that particular time, we saw how things went by. Ukraine used a majority of the drones at the time to counterattack against Russia, and what we saw was marvelous spectacular of how a small tech can go and carry on such operations. Even in the case of the India and the Pakistan issue, which we saw last year, the Operation Sindoor, which happened, drones were used in a large quantity against each other. It was a spectacle, I would say, main highlight of the particular Operation Sindoor, that number of drones being used, and even the military personnel mentioning that this is how the war now looks like. It goes much and more beyond the guns and the weapons, and it goes toward the case of drones. And that's something which also is happening right now in the Iran and the Israel USA issue. Iran has a huge stockpile of drones right now, as the report has been coming about the quantity which they have in the case of drones. That's a very big number. So that's what I feel for the overall case of technologies adventures being used. Just very sorry, I'm getting a couple of messages. Speaking of technology, I was just facing issue of technology only. Yeah, somebody sent some wrong payment to me. So yeah, no worries. So yeah, coming back to the case of the technological impact, that's the case for the drones, the AI use, and then the mention, like I mentioned, the case of Israel here, uh, the way social network analysis happened to track the supreme leader of Iran. That's how we see technology being used more and more in the case of warfare and the way things have been evolving about. Because so yeah, coming back, the drone part has been used, AI part has been used, social network analysis, the forecasting method. That's something as a topic also once again I've touched here basically. And then the case of cyber warfare. There has been repeated, I would say, incidents on how and why how Israel had sent back the Iran's nuclear program way back to the past by carrying on operations. There has been multiple reports where the Iran's nuclear facilities and their overall technological aspects were being impacted. That's where I feel the case and the element of technology becoming a geopolitical competition revolves more and more. Even the ongoing issue, we saw the case of how Iran was. Data centers nowadays are a crucial element when it comes to the case of uh, having the information and the overall usage of technology being uh, foreseen. That's where I feel that Iran is sending a signal by attacking those data centers here so that they can create a panic and chaos amongst the rest of the world. That's the element around the case of technology. Another, what we see, space technology as a different section also exists, but there's a question here itself. I think if we can talk it here itself, it would be a good fit. Question number 44. So, space, sorry, 42. So space tech is another thing which has been, I would say, expanding, and there has been talks of maybe positioning nuclear weapons or missiles in the case of space. So far, it has not been happening anytime soon because countries have been cautious for this particular move. Because if you have a missile now in the space, it's gonna be game over at any moment. If we remember the case of the Greenland, why I had mentioned the Greenland and the topic of the case of even the Panama Canal. So what has happened basically is China has something called a fractional orbital bombardment system. In the past time, when USA and USSR were going up against each other, Greenland used to have many radars of USA positioned here. So there used to be this air base of USA here. It was the Ruhu Air Base, if I'm not wrong. Just let me USA Air Base in Greenland. Something standing with the name of R. It was maybe. Yeah, Thule Air Base, not R. Thule Air Base. So Thule Air Base was something which USA had positioned here. They had a big radar at that time, which could easily counter any another missile which would come from the Russian side towards the case of USA. But the thing which now has happened is the technology is advanced much and much beyond. And what we have right now is something called the fractional bombardment system. So this is how the fractional bombardment system looks like basically. If I can take this map, sorry, photo on that screen, I think it's not visible much here. Is it visible? No, yeah, now it's visible. So if I can take this here. So what used to happen in the earlier side, because suppose if this is launch side is Russia and the target side is USA, they could simply send their ballistic missiles or the hypersonic missiles from here, and then it could go and position an attack there. Now USA could have their radar position somewhere around the here, and they could easily track the ballistic missile and the glider missile. That's something which would lead to the job well done. However, what now has happened is the case of a fractional bombardment system. Under the fractional bombardment system, a country can launch their missile into the atmosphere. It can keep on revolving, 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 and then at a particular time, it can change the orbit and go and attack this particular location. If I have to show it in this particular way, suppose I take the case of China. So China can have their missiles launched. It could keep on orbiting across the world, and then when the time comes right, they could launch that missile from somewhere around here, and it could go and attack USA like anything. And the radars which they have, they're positioned up here in the Greenland area. They don't have radars pointing downwards. That's where some people claim that maybe Panama Canal's requirement, which Mr. Trump has, it goes much beyond the case of economy, but also goes to even counteract China. So I got to know about this particular fact around the case of fractional orbital bombardment system during my study preparation for UPSC. There was a question around the same, and that's when the context came about. So that's the case of technological aspect being used more and more in the case of geopolitics. Even the basic sea cables which we read, sea cables can serve a good example here. Countries are trying to connect with each other across the board with the optical fibers and even the sea cables for the oil requirements. Right now, with the issue going about, only 9% of the global requirement could be met if the sea cables are being used. So that's where the use of technology is expanding more and more. With the advent of AI and other elements expanding, that's what I feel for the case of technology becoming a tool in the geopolitical competition and also the space technological fit. If I have to maybe quote one more example, nuclear in itself could be a big technology. We have seen the advent of nuclear submarines, countries possessing nuclear submarines finally, and then their nuclear submarines and the triad finally establishing. So that's the initial basics around the case of tech and space tech also as such in geopolitics. Coming towards the next question, how I think the size is much bigger. Yeah. So coming to the next question now, how do trade wars affect common citizens? Okay, I will try to divide this question in two contexts here. First, it could be the country which has applied sanction, basically, example USA, and the countries on which sanction was applied. And to give a good picture, I think if we can talk about multiple countries here, it could be a very good deal. I can talk about Iran here, I can talk about India here, I can talk about even China here. Russia is something which we can talk about, European Union we can talk about, and even Brazil maybe we can talk about, or Sri Lanka, Pakistan. Yeah, it's multiple countries. I think we can cover it up together, and it would be a good discussion then. So coming to the application of sanctions, so the biggest highlight when it comes with the case of Mr. Trump and his administration has been the use of trade wars. Sanctions have been applied like anything against the world, and what it has led is to a chaos in the US economy itself. As of now, the sanctions which were applied, they have been removed. The Mr. Trump had taken help of emergency provisions. If I can quote the exact from one of my own past discussion. So just a small second for the context, if I can have in my hand for the facts. Uh, IEPA, somewhere around here it was. Just a second if I can search. Yeah. So coming to the context, so the sanction games which has been used by Mr. Trump. So Mr. Trump had taken help of. If I can apply this entire here, would be much and much beneficial for others also. So just give me 1 second. If I can add this here. Yeah. So that's how the things look like now. Right now, is the chat working fine? Yeah, it's working fine. So Mr. Trump had taken help of emergency powers under the IEPA Act, under which the sanctions and the tariff routes had been applied. However, with the Supreme Court of USA now positioning judgment and order against him, that's what I feel the case of how the thing has evolved much and much beyond the countries and also has come on to impact the US itself. Any and every windfall tax which they have gained by applying this sanction, there are now discussions going on how they would be paid back to the companies. The Supreme Court has left this decision towards the local courts on making a decision on whether the tariffs have to be paid back or not. If I can mention here, the windfall tax gain discussion is on, yet if the taxes are to be repaid or not. Now, what happens in this particular issue basically is then is USA already owes somewhere around 33 to 34 trillions in debt. Their interest payment in debt is near about 1 trillion. That's even much beyond the countries like Switzerland's GDP. That's what I feel that it leads to a big issue for the US country already because A, they already have a lot of loan at the stake as compared to the GDP. B, with this particular issue now happening about, they have to pay back the countries again, the corporations, big corporations again, and this further would only end up impacting the common man itself. The thing is, just a second, if the price commodity of a particular good keeps on expanding, corporations would be forced to increase the price of the same. If the price gets increased, it would end up getting a chaos for the country itself. The people are the ones who would finally face the brunt. That's what is happening about. Inflation has been reported to increase in USA, and not much people are liking the way things have been happening about. So that's the case for trade was affecting common citizens. Now, coming to the context of countries on how these sanctions and how, in general, the trade wars impact. One of the biggest country which has faced the brunt of the sanctions is Iran. I feel the way things have evolved right now, the inflation peaking, the revolution against the supreme leader, his assassination, and now the things happening about everything and everything has to do with the trade wars and the sanction game. So the thing is, religion is a good thing. Having a faith in a leader is a good thing, but at the end of the table you need food on the table. So what has happened in the case of Iran is due to all those ongoing sanctions and the trade wars by USA, the frozen assets of the IRGC, the people are starving now. Inflation is peak, people are starving, and that's one of the biggest reason why the last year's revolt against the supreme leader and the Iranian regime took place. Because at the end of the day, you need food on the table, and if you're not able to, I would say, sleep well, eat well, people would not like this thing happening about. That's the first case when I feel the case of this sanctions impacting the area of Iran and how thing was evolved. If I now take the case of India here, so I think किस्मत ये है हाँ ठीक है you can talk about this also in much and much detail. So if I have to now mention the case of India here, I think if I can just fetch back my notes on India and US deal, India US Iran sorry India US trade deal also, I think it could be a good topic to talk here. So if I can be just be given 1 minute, I will be back with my notes. You can have the company of Pikachu for now. I'm just coming back in 1 minute. Yeah, so sorry, I'm back again. I must have liked Pikachu more. I think it's fine, working well and good. So sorry, I'm back again. I must have liked Pikachu more. Yeah, cool. So coming to the case of the India US trade deal, As of now, the trade deal does not stand in the way it was initially positioned about, because the Supreme Court order has come about, and then the case of deals being sidelined. But still, I think if we can get a bit of a context or talk around the same, it could be a good thing. Just give me 1 second. If I can have the notes straight in front of me. I think maybe phone would help there. Files. Yeah, so here I have the India US deal in front of me finally, and I think if we can give a bit of a context on that, because this is something which had not been discussed a long while. I had missed this topic accidentally, so I think, yeah, if the India US trade deal could be talked here, so it could be a good topic. So what had happened basically initially was India was forced to have a sanction of the order 25% plus a 25% more due to the Russian oil which we were importing. So that's something which was seen by Mr. Trump, that if sanctions are applied on India, it could finally persuade Russia to stop that war. So, coming to the discussion now for this particular deal. So, the deal which got signed between USA and India, can be said to be a bilateral trade agreement with the tariffs down at 18% as per the deal. It's as per the deal, but as per the deal initial. However, right now we are at the 10% thing due to Supreme Court decision. I would give a bit of a context about that also once again if it's an issue. So, what that deal saw to me, I would say it was a bit of a problematic deal, because the terminologies which has been used, they weren't the best of the terms which has been used here. Yes, assurances have been given by the Indian side that the securities and the overall protection of the farmers would be given, but and also India was smart enough to mention in that clause that if anything happens which leads to a favorable conditions for the trade being improved, we can negotiate the trade again, and that's what we have done. We can now again negotiate the trade with them with the ongoing Supreme Court issue. But still, there were some terms which I felt were very ambiguous here, and that's something which could lead to an issue. The words which were there in the ambiguity one, these were the guaranteed purchase agreements, and the word was eliminate slash reduce. Just pay heed, it's eliminate slash reduce tariff on all USA industrial goods and wide range of US food and agri. So that's what a big, I would say, issue comes about, because, and there was also a term around economic security part. The economic security is something of a word which becomes problematic, because what if this economic security means that if sanctions are applied to a particular country, India can now not go and deal with them? That's what I feel it to be a big issue initially. And the word of eliminating, reducing tariffs, it's a bit of an ambiguous word, because you are not specifying it's either reduction or it's elimination. And why I say it is a big of a concern, because here are some facts which I wanted to show you. So, the India US deal, which has been progressing about, here's the agriculture part, the biggest issue which everyone has right now, and the biggest fear which everyone normally has always. The thing is, the exports from the US side to India had been expanding a lot already. As per the report which I have in front of me by the US Department of Agriculture, exports by the US side on agriculture to India has already increased by 34%, whereas India's side, the growth has only been a meager 5%. And this was before the bilateral trade agreement being signed. Now, my question here is, if we have already seen a 34% increase in US exports to India, what can happen if the deal gets signed or the event gets introduced further? That's one big issue which people have talked about. So, issue with respect to farm security, but I am very much confident about our government. One thing which has been common across the board when it comes to the case of the Indian government is Indian government uh, respects and protects the farmers. So that's what I feel that we will come around a better, I would say, deal with them. And it has been rightly said by Mr. Piyush Goyal, the Commerce Ministry of India, that interest of domestic farmers and milk producers have been kept alive, because we saw it even in the case of the Indian New Zealand deal. In the Indian New Zealand deal, the dairy industry was not opened up. Even in the case of the India Australia deal, the dairy industry was not opened up. Even when India pulled out from the RCEP, it was the dairy which was a big topic. That's where I feel that yes, the government is going to protect the farm security very well. But the data which has been going about and the confusion which has been created by especially the US side, because they have been saying words, they have been quoting figures, that leads to a bit, I would say, of uh, misinformation, I would say. uh, US side data talks seem to scare people. That's what I would say here. So that's the case for agriculture. Apart from that, the biggest flag which people have mentioned, the red flag, which we nowadays like to so call, the $100 billion per year part of investments buying part, and 500 billion in the next 5 years. That's something which people see to be issue, because currently what the thing is, India imports somewhere around $86 billion exports to USA, versus imports of the order of only $45 billion or so. So there's a $41 billion deficit towards the case of USA. Now the thing which happens here, if we are to get $100 billion of a deal, where will that come from? There was a mention of procurement of aero material and engines, but that would also just amount towards a $60 billion deal. So what's with the rest of the money then? That's some big issue which people feel, that how that $100 billion would become about. And that's why I say that misinformation should not be spread. People thought that $500 billion जो वो कह रखा था वो एक बारी का था. It's not $500 billion at a one go. It's a $500 billion across 5 years. So that's how the thing was happening about. It's yet not clear how that would be taken care of, and also with the issue going on with the U.S. administration, the Supreme Court sanctions. It's still, I would say, just now all confused for the people, because you don't know now what's going to happen, because things are yet to stabilize. We already have a war going about right now, so yeah, it's a big issue. That's the case for the India US part which I saw. What I right now see in front of me in the case of the India US is that the language, like I mentioned, the language is a bit of a problem. People were a bit of a concern with the words being used were around economic security, alignment strengthening, uh, addressing the issues around non-market policies of third countries. That's something which people thought that yes, it might lead to some trouble. So that's how the initial, I would say, thing looks like. If I have to further quote some things, so as per as per the Commerce Ministry of India, Mr. Piyush Goyal, he said that they will not allow the Indians side, the Indian administration, they won't allow any entry for vegetables of the form of the frozen vegetable part, the potatoes, the peas, the beans, the legumes, the preserved vegetables, and the assorted canned vegetables. If I can add the actual context also for the people, like I mentioned, I am not saying anything which is, I would say, my own. I'm just quoting the facts which I have in front of me because genuinely people are confused right now of what will happen. So don't spread misinformation. We have a lot of misinformation already going about in this issue. So if as a genuine, I would say, responsible geopolitical lovers, I think it would be a nice thing if we are avoiding these particular topics of misinformation. That's the case for Iran, India, and then coming to the case of China. Then the sanctions and the war games which are being used by the U.S. administration towards China, that has, I would say, impacted the rest of the world itself because it has actually backfired a lot. When US has started to put an embargo on the chip manufacturing capabilities of Chinese companies, the chip size which was being talked about, the H20 chip size. If I can attach another video here for the reference for people, like I said, I'm not that much of a tech guy, and that's why I don't like to quote a particular thing if I'm not much aware about that, because that might lead to a wrong fact from my own end, and I'm not that guy who will say anything or everything to just get the views. So I'm just attaching a small video here on the issue around semiconductor and chip industry, on how the current issues have been evolving around. Just give me 1 second. Yeah. So the chip industry part. It's a very good video. It's from Search Party. So do give a watch. I think it's applied here. Yep. Yeah. So that's the case of chip race. And what then happened was China started to put restrictions from China around rare earth elements. If I can quote the exact elements, it could be good for some people which love to see the fact which minerals were uh, embargoed by China. Yeah, it's the antimony, gallium, germanium, which has been mainly banned by the administration of China towards the US administration, so that they don't get the benefits now for the case of the industry around the electric vehicles. That's the case for how the trade war gets on to impact the countries and also goes beyond the borders. Even in the case of Russia, like I mentioned, Russia's assets are frozen right now. Sanctions are much and much applied here. Oil as an issue still rages. So that's how the economy and crisis keep on expanding and expanding. Uh, Even the case of Sri Lanka, का तो मैं क्या ही बोलूँगा यहाँ पर? I would say Bangladesh could be a good mention here. So when the trade deal got signed between India and USA at the time, another news which went was that Bangladesh can have 0% of tariffs on textile industry, but the condition was the procurement of raw material has to happen from the US side. So this leads to, I would say, the industrial base of the own country being becoming an issue, and the country being much and more dependent on the outside world, and they, I would say, being indebted to the country at large, the bigger power. So that's the case for how the trade wars have been affecting the common citizens. Their plights, their jobs, their opportunities have been impacted. Even in the case of the Brazil, we saw how sanctions were applied, and Mr. Lula da Silva, he was trying to have a alliance, or I would say a much better deal with India and the rest of the BRICS part. And the European Union also has been showing that the sentiments against the Trump administration has been building about. So that's the case for the trade war, the games happening about. Currently, it's a 150-day standoff happening by the side of USA. They have used Section 122 to impose 10% of tariffs across the board. Right now, the topic is not being discussed because we have the war going on about. So yeah, let's see what happens in the current future now. That's the third question. Sorry, fourth question then. Coming about why is climate change now a geopolitical issue? Is climate change now a geopolitical issue? Are they talking somewhere or the other the context around the case of ice cap melting and the Russia angle? It could be somewhere around the case of sharing river boundaries. Might need to read more on this because I'm not getting much pointer island nations and overall the way the USA administration now sees climate change. So I think maybe this four topics broader theme and a bit of a more to read from my own end. From my own end. Okay, so coming up to this particular topic, just a second. Yeah. So the ice cap melting and the Russian angle. Just a second. One of the most country I would say which gets happy when the topic around the climate change gets discussed is the country Russia because a thing that happens is that whenever the climate change topic builds up and the ice start to melt up, the Arctic ice gets freed. So if I can take you back to the map once again, so the Arctic ice here, it's a cold based climate most of the time. The ice is packed here, and when finally the ice caps are melting because of the Arctic amplification accelerating, which I discussed a lot in the previous videos. That's where I feel that this opens up possible trade routes for Russia and also exploration of mineral reserves and oils in the Arctic Ocean. Uh, there has been incidents of the eastern side project. I don't remember the exact name. It was somewhere around that the eastern side project of Russia, far eastern, like something is like that only. If I can confirm the exact word, the far eastern, yeah, the far eastern side. Hmm. Far East Russia project. There was some name to that. I think they just call that only Russia's Far East policy. They have been trying to expand the way they can in the best of the ways so that they can now capitalize on the new trade routes being open about. They have the best crushers to move across the ice and do the bit. Even the deal around Vladivostok and Chennai as a possible trade option, that's something also get discussed. That's the basic around how Russia gets benefit from the climate change. Then the element around rivers, there has been incidents reported that the oceans and the rivers have been drying a lot, and with the glaciers now melting, the ice caps melting, and the movement of the broader sea changing, that's where I feel that it leads to a big issue overall for the lower end countries. For example, if I take the case of India, so it's India is called the upper riparian state, Pakistan is called the lower riparian state. We see the glaciers coming from the side of India and then the river coming all the way to the Pakistan. So India has the upper riparian states, and this particular part of Pakistan, this becomes the lower riparian state. If now, God forbid, in the upcoming 120 years, the in this water starts to dry down, it would lead to some big issues in Pakistan, and it might trigger some geopolitical conflicts. Even in the case of broader countries, we have in Germany. So sorry, the rivers around the case of Europe. It's been a while since I've studied for UPSC, so I'm not remembering the best of the names. There was the Danube River, Donstag River. So yeah, if they start to try about, the countries can have clashes amongst each other. That's where the river as a geopolitical issue comes about, and often a topic around Helsinki rules. Helsinki rules gets thrown where we talk how the upper riparian state must be accommodative of the lower riparian states. That's the case for the basic part of law that I've touched in this. I think in this water treaty, I don't think I've discussed in this water treaty. So maybe if I can go a bit of a tangent and discuss about in this water treaty also. So the rivers that gets included here are, if you want to remember the order, so it's can be remembered that in June, car run bit slow. In June, car run bit slow. It's Indus, Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas, and Satluj. So in this Jhelum Chenab, this is something on which rights are also given to Pakistan side. Pak given rights, and the Ravi Beas Satluj that are exclusively held by the Indian side. And I have taken this acronym from Mr. Sir Rushikesh Dudat sir. Unfortunately, he passed away during the COVID era. So a huge respect to Rushikesh Dudat sir, one of the best teachers of geography and environment. He was a legend, but he unfortunately passed away during the time of COVID. So I have taken that acronym from him only. So that's how the Indus water system looks like. So in June, Karan bit slow. If I can attach a small map here for the reference of people from the community. So yep, shout out to Civil Daily for this map. These were the good old days, VPSC. Yeah, so here's how the map looks like. The Indus is Jhelum, Chenab, Ravi, Beas, and Satluj. And Pakistan gets the waters from Indus, Jhelum, and Chenab. The procurement and the allocation happens. In the Operation Sandhu time, Mr. Modi had finally said that it has been said in the past also that war, pani or khoon ek saath nahi beh sakta, that water and blood can't move together. And at that time, we had started to stop the sharing of data with the Pakistan side. And that's the case, basic, which maybe you can remember for the case of Indus Water Treaty. There are some dams on Jhelum and Chana which were being made by India, and then the case started to build about in the UN. Initially, the discussion can happen together. If that does not get sort down, you can go towards another preliminary discussion, then another board gets established, and then the UN angle comes about. I think this goes much beyond the complexity, and it's been a while since I've remembered. So if I can also check in this water treaty dispute resolution mechanism. Dispute resolution mechanism. Yeah, it's a three-tier. Is a permanent in this commission, then there's a neutral expert, and then there's the court of arbitration. The thing that happened in the case of India and Pakistan was Pakistan had directly went and talked to the court of arbitration and not went towards the case of the neutral expert. That's where the problematic issues had been building about. If I can mention these three terms here, the permanent in this commission. Just a second. Dispute resolution. We have the permanent in this commission, then we have the neutral expert. And just a fact, once again, World Bank is someone who advises on this particular issues which are happening. So it's a signatory to the Indus Water Treaty. So yeah, that's the case for Indus Water Treaty. Now coming to the case of the island nation. Island nations have talked a lot about climate change as a precarious end for their own safety. There has been incident reporting about Indonesia. Yeah. So Jakarta was in the news that the Jakarta city is now sinking, and they have now replaced the capital of Indonesia. What was the new capital of Indonesia? New capital of Indonesia. Something with the name of N something. Yeah, Nusantara. So that's the case for Indonesia and the island states demanding that their rights be met, and a very meager amount being paid by the administrations during the ongoing UNFCCC negotiations. So that's how the element around climate change builds about. Even the case of your administration, Mr. Trump says climate change is a hoax. So that's the way things are being seen by the biggest country of the lot. and the one which has the biggest finances, and with them outside the Paris deal and the negotiations, it's not something which is going to benefit anyone. So that's the case for climate change as a geopolitical issue. If I can read more, I would surely read more and share my points with you. Just a small second. Touch the banana mark. But yeah. Okay. Coming to the next question now. Yeah, I think we discussed the space one. So yeah, coming to the next question now. How do global institutions struggle during major crisis? We are seeing this thing right now happening. We see the way UN, the best code for UN is a toothless tiger. It's just a toothless tiger. It's just for a namesake right now, because I don't think or I don't see it being of a benefit or it being of any purpose for the rest of the community or the rest of the world, because its purpose was to show that the wars don't take place, the issues don't happen. But what we are seeing right now is completely just a different thing. The issues keep on expanding, and UN just sits, and all they can offer is a space for people to talk, wherein the UNSC has their veto and the discussion then gets stopped. So that's something of problematic issue when it comes to the case of UN. With even the ongoing issue, I have not seen much of a statement, much of a big response on the side of the UN, apart from the condemnation or the apart from that we are going to talk and see that the peace happens. If talk would have led to the peace, that's not how the world operates well. So the peace board plan which Mr. Trump came about was, I would say, a tight slap on the face of the UN, because the UN is not being respected the way it used to be in the past. So yeah, the global institutions are struggling a lot. Biggest issue being the UN's overall losing power and losing a voice. The issues around the veto powers. That's what I feel the case happens. And then the dominance of China and the USA, their willingness to not reform and help the other people. That's something as a topic comes about. I have a separate video on this already created on how the global institutions are influencing the geopolitical issues. So you can check that out. It could be of a good watch for the same. If I can attach the same link here, just a second.
Same link.
So I had made one video wherein I discuss all the geopolitical institutions, the P5, the P4, the G4, the Coffee Club, and all that acronyms which you often hear about. So that could be a good watch to know more about the case of geopolitical institution, because it's a video in itself. Last time I made a video on that, it went somewhere around 1 hours 30 minutes again. So just attaching it in a second. Video, video on multinational institutions. So here's the video attached for the reference of everyone. Just a second. No, why it's not working well? Yeah, it's not been attached. That's the case for the institutions here. How do middle powers influence global decisions today? How do middle powers influence global decisions today? I think more or less there are two ways in which, maybe two, maybe three, yeah, three ways in which they have been influencing. So one way could be direct engagement, direct engagement by support. One can be mediation, another could be the ambivalent stance. Direct engagement by support we see in the case of uh, country like Canada saying this thing. Canada mentioned that we are the middle power. I had huge respect for Mark Carney sir after the Davos summit, but then when he finally once again on this ongoing issue of Iran and USA said that he is in full support of the side of USA, and they are going to do as the way things happen about. It just shows that at the end of the day, the middle powers they somewhere or the other need the help of the big ones, the big boys, the USA, the China, the Russia to see their own support. Russia gets the support from the side of Belgium a lot. Belgium, था ना? Just a second. Sorry, Belarus, and Belgium is at the side of Germany. So yeah, Russia gets support from the side of Belarus. So China gets support from its other neighboring countries. Pakistan is something there. And that's where I feel that these small middle powers do their bit when it comes to the case of direct engagement. Then the element of mediation comes about. Turkey has been some of those countries who has been leading the chain of mediation. Oman is someone which has been leading this chain of mediation, and even Dubai has been doing the same. Even the ongoing issue which we saw in the case of US and Iran, the Oman side were actually leading some good negotiations between the US part and the Iran part. However, the deal got decimated because of some issues, or maybe what Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi wanted at the time. That's the second element when it comes to the case of middle powers influencing the global decisions. And then the ambivalent stance, which India often goes towards, of not taking any particular camp on seeing that we are not, I would say, on the side of anyone, and just trying our best to increase our interest more and more. That's what I feel the case of the middle powers influencing the global decisions come about. When they are in direct engagement on a particular country and supporting them, they build up a front, and it leads to combined economic sanctions or economic engagement, which they bring about. Mediation as a roles help to bring peace, and the ambivalent stance, I would say, that just acts as a hedge in the ongoing issues. So that's the case for the middle powers and their influences on the global decisions today. I think everything we discuss somewhere or the other lines up with this only. So not much, I would say, of a lecture would be needed on this particular topic to discuss. Okay, going on next ahead. Are narratives and perceptions becoming important as military power? I think we had a good enough discussion about this the last time, the perception part, that uh, the perception is something which is leading to this issue. Israel perceives, USA perceives Iran to be a big threat, and that's when they attack. And the preemptive strikes which happen, that's something which happened for the case of perception. So, of course, yes, the narratives and the perception has been influencing much and much more as compared to the military power. Israel's President Mr. Netanyahu has been saying since long that uh, Iran is going to have the nuclear weapon finally. So that's how narratives and perception has been building up the issue since past. The attack by USA on Iraq, the element of Saddam Hussein having the weapons of mass destruction. That's all what we see from perception and narrative only. So that's the case for the narrative perception. Once again, yeah, it's just a broader theme, a broader question, something which you have discussed a lot already. How does geopolitics shape job opportunities? I think diaspora is something which we talked a lot in the initial end also. So yeah, coming to the last question, much good and important question. What kind of world order are we likely to see in the next decade? What kind of world order are we likely to see in the next decade? I think it would be a much more fragmented multipolar world with some prominent power hinging towards China and USA. China is something which I feel is gonna rise more and more in the upcoming years, because the way US has been operating, the way they have been treating their own trusted allies and partners since millennia, it's gonna impact USA in the long run. Because the way things have evolved right now in Iran, the 1980 to 88 issue which happened back time the Iraq-Iran war used to took place. At the time, Kuwait-based oil tankers used to have a USA's flag on them, as they used to escape the Persian Gulf, the Strait of Hormuz, so that Iran does not attack them. Right now, we see ships are having Chinese flag on them to escape this chaos. So this small detail shows how the power shift has been taking from the side of USA towards the case of China. That's one big thing I see. And overall, the way China has been expanding across the board and the borders, whereas other countries are not. IMEC was seen as a good intervention to the BRI project. But what we are seeing right now, IMEC has went for utter chaos. The India, Middle East, European Economic Corridor, nowhere or the other is seeing any investment happening or it's any growth happening. Israel, the main partner in the IMEC corridor, is up against Hamas, the issues happening, the Iran issues happening. So I don't see IMEC as a broader theme building a counter to the BRI project. So the relevance of Europe at that broader stage, once again, I see is becoming more and more a problematic issue because you don't have anything to show for. The IMEC corridor is just chaos. Chabahar as a port was a good opportunity for India to expand beyond the issues of IMEC corridor, even or just to access the Central Asia. But that's something also we are not able to build up here. And the BRI, the Belt Road Initiative of China, it keeps on expanding. The checkbook diplomacy of China, it keeps on expanding. So what I see in this case of world order is USA is still the hegemonic power. I don't see the dollar falling in the next 10 years for now. It's gonna be a big, big while before USA's own dominance starts to fall down and the global oil dollar synergy gets distorted. But for now, yes, USA would remain, but China's rise would be more and more acceleratory. The issue which has happened in Iran, people are quoting that USA would not leave the same strong entity or the power it was in the past. But who would capitalize more? It's China. And I think there's a lesson which other countries might take from here that you need to show up for your own interest. India, for example, they need to expand the investments on how they can benefit from the China plus one strategy. Countries have started to move away from China. They are going towards textile industries of Vietnam, tech industries of UAE, but they have not been much able to come towards India. Initiatives around incentive schemes, investment opportunities, the way the politics, the regional politics happen, the comfort, the ease of doing business, providing cheap labor, something or the other of incentive. India needs to provide more and more to the countries so that they can be attracted towards the mainland of India and the production, the investments can raise up because we are already seeing in India the issues around the investments. FDIs had been pulling out, FPIs had been pulling out with the war already going about. It's still a crisis. Well, that's where I feel that India has a lot to offer, and yes, we are going to become the top giants in the world. A dream which every UPSC guy who wishes to have part of the Indian Foreign Service was to have India being strong enough to counteract any other policy which happens in the world. So yeah, that's the dream which I have, the dream which I see that India becoming the global world power in somewhere or the other, and we can very easily do it. We are a 1.4 billion strong population. That's it's a beautiful, I would say, population in its own end. Uh, we have so much to offer our country. We have the landmass of Himalayas. We have beautiful scenic beauty of the beaches, the islands, and the northeast, the pinnacle, Delhi. Yes, we have pollution, but we have the beauty of monuments here too. So India has a lot of offer at plate, but somewhere or the other, the way the politics has been going about in India, it has to be seen. The time in the parliamentary discussions should not revolve too much towards the populist measures. It should more and more discuss on how things can be bettered about. Opposition needs to keep the ruling party accountable by asking the good questions and not using the hooliganism which has been happening in the past a lot. There is a way when it comes to the case of politics happening about quoting the अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी सर's quote here, सरकारें आएंगी जाएंगी पार्टियां बदलेंगी but ये देश रहना चाहिए. That's where I feel the politics of our own country needs to be strong. For the world order, I feel Africa as an entity would more and more rise because the interests of many countries are aligning here. Latin America also, which I feel is something which will be in the news a lot. Japan is something which I have seen right now with the right wing party coming and the overall the way they were trying to build up their own military. So Japan is something which I would see in the upcoming years be coming in the news more and more. And even the case of Europe, Germany was someone which was trying to ramp up its own defense and overall capabilities. So the world order is gonna look more and more fragmented, which I feel in the next decade, with a major hegemonic power still being USA. But China's rise would be coming. It would be coming very soon, because Taiwan is an issue which China needs to take on, and it can happen only when China is much and much more powerful. So that's what I feel when the discussion around the case of the world order as a topic comes about. And I think we are done with the next set of 10 more questions in this document. I think we are left with 10 more. Those are very specific questions. I think I would have to read a bit more on that. They are specifically around the African countries and the Latin American countries. Like, this is the question which I'm left now. Can developing regions shape global geopolitics? I think we have discussed this. So yeah, I'm left with nine odd questions, and there are mostly around the case of Africa, because I feel Africa is someone which will be in the news a lot. Many countries have their own interests here, not for developing Africa, but for carrying on their own opportunities. So yeah, nine more questions left. I think would take one more video, would read more on this, and then yeah, we can cook up a very great video on this topic. Anyways, thanks a lot for tuning in. Really appreciated the love and support which has been given so far. I am just a someone of guy who likes to talk about geopolitics a lot with the friends and the parents and the other community which we have in front of us. So yeah, it's always a pleasure to talk to people. I have to also work about some measure in which I feel that the overall quality of the video can be improved, because I have got this comment a lot that the quality of the video has been a problematic issue. But I think let's see what I can do for that also. Might be some streaming facility I can attach with Zoom or something like that can be done. Anyways, thanks a lot for tuning in. It's really appreciated. I wrote a Medium article yesterday, had posted that on the Medium, the Instagram page, and also my LinkedIn ID. Got some really good comments. So yeah, thanks a lot. It's something which I had discussed since long, but something or the other happened in the past once again, and I thought maybe if we can talk about, because who talks about men's mental health so much if we can't even maybe share our own insights, and I would say the fears and the stress maybe sometimes we have. So yeah, that's why I tried to talk about that issue, and felt glad that yeah, there are some people also there out there who have been facing and trying their best to do. So yeah, just a small message: be kind, but don't be weak, because weakness often gets equated towards a vulnerability, and the kindness which we often offer gets shown as a vulnerability seeking validation, and I would say just having people in your life. But if I have to quote a particular statement here from Chris Williamson, a guy which I follow, so he had mentioned that suppose there's a world which have 1,000 people, and the 999 people love you, adore you a lot, but you are not someone who loves or feels good enough for yourself. That's not a good, I would say, life to live. But if there is a country or a location with 1,000 people living and 999 hate you, but you are someone who loves yourself a lot, I think it's a beautiful world to live for. Because at the end of the day, when you are dying, or even when you are by the side of a bed alone, the only and other thing which is in your head is your own thoughts. And if your own thoughts are, I would say, against you, are not supportive of yourself, it does not lead to a good mental health and overall, I would say, stability in the mind and the way we can operate on a daily basis. So just a message for the rest of the world that yes, it's okay to be kind, but kindness should be proportionate enough that you don't get exploited by people out there, because this world is a very mean world. People would get any other opportunity to use and extract benefits as and when they want. Quoting Machiavelli here, it's a realist setup, and like the countries and the geopolitics happen for their own interests. Same is also something which happens amongst individual accord also, because at the end of the day, human beings are the one who are leading the geopolitics. So if we can see these betrayals happening in the geopolitical world, it's a very common thing to see in the case of the daily life also. So yeah, that's it from my side. I hope you enjoyed the live stream. The Iran issue is building up more and more. I have covered a video, two-part video on that. If something develops on that, I would surely cover up another video on that very soon. It would not be much of a trouble for me. I can very easily cover that if I can just take a screenshot for the live stream. Just a second. Yeah, one more. So yeah, anyways, thanks a lot for tuning in. It was glad to talk once again on geopolitics. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any comments, feedback, suggestion, please do let me know in the comment section below. My LinkedIn ID is attached. My Instagram also ID has been attached. So yeah, you can anyways reach me out if you have something to talk about. So yeah, thanks a lot for tuning in. See you soon. Bye. Take care.